Physical development, in early adolescence, and that particularly at the onset of puberty, we have more physical changes going on with children than any other time in their life except for the first year of infancy. Now that's amazing if you think about that we have more changes going on in early adolescence physically than any other time in their life. And what that means, and the difference is an infant is not aware or able to verbalize or not real present with all those changes. Adolescents are very aware of that. Let's talk a little bit about what kinds of things are going on inside their bodies. One is that once the growth spurt hits, their bodies change rapidly. And they complain about things that make no sense. They talk about their legs hurt, their feet hurt, their teeth hurt. And they do. They have physical pains because their bodies are growing so very rapidly. And they're growing so rapidly that they don't feel at home in their own bodies. And you know they don't feel at home in their own bodies because they can't even command their bodies. They walk into things, they trip over things. And you know, because they have so much pride, they blame inanimate objects. Stupid table, like it jumped out right in front of them. But they just are very uncomfortable physically with their bodies. And they feel like, God, this body is like, it won't do what I want it to do. And the really bad thing that I feel bad for adolescents is usually one part of their body develops into adulthood before another part catches up. And like, you know, adolescent guys, and they've got these little cute baby faces, and all of a sudden they got these big old men noses, and little baby faces and big men noses. And you try not to look at it, you know, and act like you notice that their nose is about 5 years ahead of the rest of their body, or their feet. You know, their feet are like size 12, and they're still like 4 feet, you know, walking around like this. And it's very uncomfortable. And they're very aware, like, and we always get mad at them for being so self-conscious. Well, how could they not notice that this stuff is going on? It's like really obvious to everybody else. So part of their body, and this is inevitable, that part of their body develops and the rest of their body has to wait to catch up with it. And when it all catches up, you know, they kind of look really handsome. But, you know, in the meantime, they're very uncomfortable with that. And they're just totally obsessed. That's why they spend forever in front of the mirror. That's why they can comb their hair forever. That's why young adolescents love to wear baggy clothes. Because they don't know when they get up in the morning what's going to be different about this body. And they don't know what might happen during the course of the day, so they want to cover it up. I tell you, they loved it when the alternative kind of thing came in because they could cover it up, they could wear big baggy clothes, they could hide it so that, you know, they could go home, check and see what happened while they were at school today that was different than when they went. So they're very, very preoccupied with that whole concept. And never do they ever want to talk about that. They don't want anybody to notice that. And we particularly know that early maturation on the part of guys really enhances their self-esteem. Early maturation on the part of the girls really kind of hurts their self-esteem. And girls in particular want to cover up anything that makes them different. And that's why they wear what I call the uniforms. That I had a young adolescent, she was going to 9th grade, and this is how 9th graders kind of think. They think, you know, that if I wear the right clothes to the first day of school, everything will be fine. So they obsess about what it is they're going to wear so that they don't stick out, so that people don't notice, so they kind of blend right in. Well, you know, I was laughing that several years ago one of my kids came to me. She's just devastated. She was crying. I thought, oh, we must have some real good therapy issues to deal with. I was so excited. And I go, what's wrong? She goes, well, you know, I worked for weeks planning what to wear. And I consulted everybody about it. I finally decided what I was going to wear. Well, one of my friends said, you can't wear that. It looked like you planned it. She goes, what am I going to do? I've got to go to school tomorrow. And she's crying, and she's upset. And I'm going, please. I mean, this kid had a life of trauma. Can't we talk about trauma? Do we have to talk about the fact that you don't know what you're going to wear tomorrow? But for her, that's it. She couldn't think of anything else. She just knew if she didn't dress right, she would never get through that first day. So it's a matter of, because all this stuff is different, and because it's very uncomfortable for them, and because they really don't even know all the stuff that's going on, I cannot believe that we have a generation of kids who all of these physical changes are happening, and they are much more uneducated than I would expect that they would be about what is actually happening in their bodies. And along with that comes the onset of their sexuality and their sexual feelings, and all that goes with that. And what I'm finding is that early and earlier, kids are so aware of that, and they're so uncomfortable with that, and they don't really know what to do with that. It's not like you can ignore it, especially if you live in the 90s, you can't ignore it. But people around them are uncomfortable with it. We make such a big deal, particularly with adolescent females, about the onset of their sexual development. And we make a huge deal out of it. You know, people are like, this is going to be a problem, girl. Well, why is that? Because she's developing early. Now, how's that a problem? Well, you know. It's like, no, I don't know. Now, how can we take that approach with girls and expect them to be comfortable with their sexual development. We set up scenarios with them. They're very uncomfortable. They're so uncomfortable, they don't know what to do with it, and so they get very advice from their friends. And this is what middle school girls tell other middle school girls. Just have sex and get it over with. You might as well just get it over with, because you're just going to be obsessed about it till you do it. And just get over with it. It's like no big deal. Older girls tell middle school girls, don't do that. You'll be so sorry. Don't do that. You will be so sorry. It will be such a mistake to do that. How do you know? Because that's what I did. So it's that whole concept of that emerging sexuality, that whole, they don't know who to talk to about it. They don't know how to talk about it. They don't even know what it is that they want to talk about. And the decisions they have to make around that and the pressure they have to make around that, very awkward, uncomfortable time for kids physically. The role of the family, these are what we call the baby children. And what that is that the primary thing that goes on with kids and their families at this age is that dependence conflict. That most kids at this age kind of still like their parents and really don't mind spending time with their parents, but they get the definite impression that they're not supposed to feel that way, that it's really not cool to feel like that. And they're very aware of doing anything that anybody views as babyish or immature or, dependent, or being a mama's boy. So what happens is they kind of have this real kind of hostile defense against that dependency. And we call them baby men, because we always laugh that they can't tell. At one minute they want to sit on your lap and watch cartoons with you. The next minute they're strutting around the house like they're the boss. So they're baby men. They don't know if they're children or if they're supposed to act like adults. And it's very confusing for people around them, because you don't know when you walk in if they're in the baby phase or the man phase today. You don't know where they're at and what you're supposed to do. And heaven help you if you do the wrong thing. In fact, you probably can't do the right thing with that age group of kids, because it's an internal struggle against dependence. And the more the family situation, adolescence is not something kids can do on their own. It requires the negotiation of everybody that knows them. It requires their families negotiate and do things differently. It requires that our cultures and our school systems negotiate and do things differently. So it really requires cooperation. Well, when you are in a family where separation and independence and autonomy and boundaries is threatening to the family system, the onset of adolescence creates total havoc in high-risk family situations, because parents have a certain way of negotiating, a certain way of dealing with things. Families have a certain way that serve them, and particularly if there's a lot of problems in that family. And when you have an early adolescent, they don't follow the rules. They upset the apple cart. They throw a monkey wrench into things, and families fly into crisis. Particularly, and we see this dynamic a lot with single parents, and certainly not only with single parents, but we see a lot of dynamics where the kids want to move. They have a movement towards autonomy, but feel guilty about it. Particularly adolescent girls whose mother says, it's always been her and I. We grew up together. We were more friends than we were mother-daughter. We were so close. And then the child knows that, and they have all this fear about what will happen to my mom emotionally if I pull away, what will happen to her when I leave home, will she be able to make it? And moms make it very easy for the daughters to do their separation, because they say things like, why don't you just stick a knife in my heart and get it over with? And then the child feels extremely, just so guilty. And most 14-year-old girls go, I feel very guilty. They don't do that. They act out. So the more confusing this dependency thing is, and the more the adults around the child have a hard time negotiating dependence, the more the kid acts out. And they act out and they kind of come back, and they act out and they come back. And then usually that's a sign that the people around them have not been able to successfully negotiate a new phase of development. Haven't been able to successfully renegotiate that you and I have a different role. We have a different relationship. Very painful process. And the more high risk the family is, the more problems there are, the more that whole dependency conflict gets played out. And that's really what's going on inside of most young adolescents, is they want to be connected, but they don't want anybody to know about it. Young adolescents are great one-on-one. They bring you presents that they made in class. They like to come talk to you, but they're terrible in group. Because in group, they don't want to have anything to do with you, because somebody might be watching them. So they're really great individually because they admit that they like you, but they never tell anybody that they like you. In fact, you'll have a great interchange. They'll leave your office and go, I don't like her, I ain't never coming back. And you're going, yeah, I wish, But they do that. They are very one-on-one, one way. They have those dependency needs, but outside, they don't want anybody to know that, And so you never want to face off a young adolescent in front of their peers and make them look like, they're tight with you. You never want to do that in front of their peers, because they're not going to do that, because that is not a cool thing to show everybody, because they're big and bad and they don't need us. But, but they're funny, but at the same time they're big and bad, but they want cookies and milk when they go to bed. It's that constant conflict, and that's what's inside internally for them. And the reason people feel like, what is the deal with young adolescents is they don't know what the deal is either. They can't decide. So the main dynamic is that, just constantly pulling with that. A couple of things that we need to remember. Number one, that adults and parents in particular still have a significant influence on value development for that age group. That kids listen to and care about what their parents and the adults around them will say. Even though they're going through that conflict, we still have that impact on them. We tend to think that we need to stop talking and teaching values at that age because they aren't listening. They are listening. They're not going to tell you they're listening. Gee, Mom, give me another lecture. I really enjoyed that one. They're going to tell you they're listening, but they'll walk away and tell someone else what you said. Not another kid. Okay, but someone else, or they'll listen and they'll think about it. They may not tell you they're thinking about it. So we need to understand that this is really very critical. We do not need to shuffle our kids off and think that we don't have influence on them. Here's the conflict. Here's the time where they're going through this terrible conflict about whether or not they want to be connected, want to be connected, and we move them into middle school systems. When they're 11 years old, we move them to middle schools where there's about 1 million kids, and big buildings, and complicated rules, and not very many consistent adults. All of a sudden, they got 9, 10 teachers. They got to change classes every 50 minutes. They're in a hallway with 1 million people. The principal doesn't, it seems like 1 million people to them. The principal doesn't know their name like they did in middle school or in elementary school. So, and the thought is, we are, in my opinion, we're pushing them into an adolescent culture, because if we are not available to them, where are they going to go? They're going to hook up for survival reasons with their social group. So academically in our school systems, we've done some things to this age group that we're paying a huge price for, and that we lose them. They do not, and we know, we've had terrible problems with this age group. We broke it down. We've broken them into small groups of 150 with a teaching team, with a homeroom. Those problems went away. So we really need to understand that you really need to look at what are we doing to kids this age. We need to put them in groups with smaller groups with a lot more adult connection. They need it. They respond to it. They do well with it. When I used to work in residential, the best thing to do with a 13-year-old kid was acting out, call their parents in. I just thought it was hysterical, because although their parents couldn't control them at home, their parents would walk in and they'd say, oh, they'd just hop right to. They just hop right to and do what they're supposed to, because they really do still care what parents and adults think. And we need to understand that, and we need to use that to our advantage in our work with kids. We continue to play an important role. And what they do is they want to do some kind of battle with you or whoever the authority figures are with them on testing the boundaries. And they're going to start pushing. And that's okay, that's normal, and we hold our ground. Sometimes we give in, but usually we hold our ground. And that satisfies them. But what happens is kids start to push away when they're about 12 or 13, put up some resistance, and our adult culture just caves in. And so then they don't know where the limits are, and they've got to go until someone resists. It's no fun if the adults around you don't resist. It's no fun at all. So if the kids push and the adults cave in, they're going to continue to push and continue to push until someone says, okay, that's enough. Oh, well, okay, why didn't you just say so? We need that. But they make this big, huge stink about things. I'm not going to church. You can't make me go to church. I'm never going to church again. And you're like, you're going to church. You can't make me on the way to the car. You can't make me. I'm not going in that building. Then go do it. They have to do that. They have to put up some stink so that you know that they are in control of their lives. They're no longer a baby. But usually they acquiesce. What happens is they go, I'm not going to church and you can't make me. And everybody goes, well, we can't make them, can we? Oh, well, can't make them. And then we give up the fight. And then we're absolutely no fun for them. And then they have to pick a fight with something else. So they're going to start testing curfews, rules. They're going to start testing with the way they dress. They're going to start testing with how they wear their hair, all those types of things. And here's what I tell people. People always ask me, why do kids in the 90s do extremes? Why do they do funky stuff with their hair and tattoo their bodies and pierce their bodies? Why are they doing that? And they have to do that to shock us, because they are living with a bunch of old people who are old hippies, who many of them still wear ponytails. So, all we had to do was say one swear word and wear a ponytail, and the people in our lives just were praying for us because they thought we were gone. Okay, that was it. We were gone. We were real far gone. So that's all we had to do. And everybody go, what have you done? And that was so much fun. You remember that? Oh, shock them. Now the kids come in, and they get their nose pierced and their belly button pierced, and the adults go, cool, I think I'll get me one. Well, then they have to go out and do something more outrageous. So in order to test that limit, they got to tattoo their bodies and pierce 89 body parts and do something funky with their hair. And then we go, oh, my, don't you think you've taken it a tad too far here? The best thing we can do is go, when they come in looking funky, go, what have you done to yourself? And then they'll go, and then they probably won't do anything else. If they come in looking funky and you go, cool, who cuts your hair? They're going to go out and come work next week. So why do kids in the 90s have to take those normal testing things to a limit? It's because that takes a lot to shock us. Because we still think we're old hippies. Because we're so cool. Nothing shocks us. As a result, we're doing these kids a huge disservice. So, do a kid a favor. Act outraged by something that they're like, how they're wearing their hair, their clothes, and that'll put an end to it. Please, don't go out and do it yourself. That just makes it terrible for them. So what happens is, anyway, during this phase, the role of the family, all that conflict dependency is going on with families and adult people in their life. So then we look at what happens socially. That social peer groups start to take an important role, but they should not be all-consuming at this age. But they start to take an important role, more important than any other time. That they become aware of social rules, they become aware of social expectations, they become aware of the fact that other people are looking at them, judging them, and they're more acutely aware of that than any other time. And if you have a balance, if you have a kid with some really strong adult connections and a kid with some strong peer group connections, that's great. What happens is when we put these kids in environments where there are no adults available to them, the peer group connections become everything to them. You do not want young adolescents wandering around and all they've got to influence them are other young adolescents. Is that not a scary thought? That's a scary thought to me. I mean, even if they have, 18, 19-year-old brothers or cousins who have an influence on them, in many ways that's probably better because of the maturation. But we have, it's a natural progress that kids are going to feel more connected to their peer group. At this age, though, it's really equal. Adults over here, peer groups over here. Unless these guys are not available, then the peer group takes on a huge role. So we need to look at that when we work with them. That they become really an increasingly important way for kids to figure out what is appropriate behavior, what are the standards, what are the models. Kids really start to look at their peer group for sex information. When I was growing up, the coolest person in middle school was the one who had the most information about sex. And the one who had the most information about sex was somebody that had an older brother or sister. Now, see, I had an older sister. She's only a year older than me, but I had an older sister whom I got all my sexual information from, whom I passed it along to my friends. And they thought I was so cool I had access to all this. The problem was I learned that my sister didn't know, and she was making it up as she went along. So she was passing misinformation on to me. I was passing it on to my friends, and it was like no wonder that half my graduating class got pregnant because we didn't have good information. I was not giving them accurate information. But that's kind of the thing, that they want to figure that out. They ask among and between themselves. That's why they talk about it all the time. That's really where they're going to find out what is the deal with not only sexual information, but sex role, guys and girls, and how are girls, and what do they think like that, and what are guys all about. Kids really like to run in teams. They love to do team stuff, gangs, packs. They like to do that at that age. That's still very appropriate. They tend to get into lots of crushes and hero worship types of things and falling in love with their teachers and all that stuff. Kids are very boisterous, very energetic. It's like they can hardly contain the energy within their body. That they just can't walk down the hall without knocking 3 or 4 ceiling tiles. I mean, they just can't do it. They can hardly restrain themselves. They need a lot of activity at this age. It's very normal for them to have a lot of activity at this age. They need to have that. The more we try and restrain that, the more they feel like they're bursting at the seams. And it's not just kids who are hyperactive or ADD that need release. This is a very appropriate thing for that age group. They're rowdy. They're kind of loud. They're kind of silly. They're real boisterous. They really like to have a couple really close friends. Kids are really kids get faced with all kinds of value-based decisions at this age. Unfortunately, these kids, I wouldn't want to be a 12-year-old middle school student right now because these kids they have to make decisions that they have no business having to make. I have a 12-year-old boy that lives next to me. We're pretty good friends. And he was telling me that he talks to me all the time about stuff that goes on in his middle school. And he was telling me that he was at the bus stop in our neighborhood and somebody was selling cocaine, and he didn't know what to do. He was in 7th grade, and I think 8th grade, was selling cocaine. He didn't know what to do with that. And he was devastated. He's like, first of all, if the kid finds out I even told you, he's going to beat me up. And then his mom's going to get mad at my mom if I tell my mom and he's like, I don't know what to do. What should I do? And I was going, you shouldn't have to make that choice. You should not be that age and have to decide what to do with, and this is a kid from what I would consider a very protected kind of environment. I don't even want to think about all those other kids out there who don't live in protected environments and have to make those decisions very, very early. And they don't have the skills to do that. They don't have and they don't know like the social implications. They're so afraid that they will say something, go to school, get beat up the next day, and very likely they might, because middle school kids love to fight. They're always fighting about something. I had a middle school kid who just made a really bad choice, and he told me, he said, I made a really bad choice, and he did. And he goes, it was bad, wasn't it? And I really thought about his situation. I said to him, you shouldn't have had to make that choice. If I had to make that choice when I was your age, there was no good choice to make. There was no good choice that was inappropriate for a child your age, because this situation was inappropriate for a child your age. And more, that's what kids are facing. They make poor value-based decisions because they're having to make decisions that, even under the best of circumstances, they should not be faced with. They don't have the maturity for it. They don't have the wisdom for it. They don't have the life experiences for it. And it's very, very hard for them. Very, very scary. At the same bus stop, there was another little girl. She's a 6th grader. She was 11. And I asked her, I said, how come you're always standing off by yourself at the bus stop? She goes, because those big boys have cocaine, and I don't know what to do. So I just stand by myself. Is that okay? Should I do something else? I go, that's fine, honey. That's a really good, 11 years old, that's a good decision. She said, well, that's good because I didn't know. She goes, and I'm really scared of them. Well, you just stand there. And so now I never leave my neighborhood till the bus leaves. So I'll see if anybody's messing with her. I'll go up there and tell them a thing or two. So I kind of wait till she gets on the bus. And she goes, I don't tell my mom because my mom would come up there, probably beat those boys up, embarrass me. And then I know I couldn't go ever to middle school again. So, I kind of just watch until the bus leaves, and she knows I watch, and we kind of laugh about that. And she gets on the bus and she waves. So those are terrible things that kids have to face. They're thrown into situations when really they're very, very immature. So they are faced with value decisions. We have to talk to them about value decisions. It's also a time where socially two things happen. And one is they feel like they don't have social choices. They feel like their social roles are given to them by their peer group. That this is a really, I thought, wonderful explanation by a young adolescent. He says it's kind of like when you go into middle school, they're all the belonger kids here, and then all the kids who don't belong over here. And I said, well, who are the belonger kids? He goes, kids, like that do something that make them fit in. He goes, you've got your really, really belonger kids, like the kids who are, football people and class president, and then you got your cheerleaders, and then you got your wrestling, you got all those people. And then you got a bunch of other people kind of in the middle, wish they were more cool than they are, but they're okay. They got a group of friends. Then you got everybody else. And I go, who's everybody else? He goes, those are the rejects. He says, so if you find yourself on the reject side, now so you do nothing to, this happens that's how, from their perspective, people assign you a peer group role. They really believe that someone gives you a role. You do not have a choice in that. So if you find yourself over here with the rejects, you've got two choices. You can either be a nerd or you can be a burnout. That's basically what he was telling me. He goes, well, so he goes, or a hoodlum. He said, you can be a hoodlum. So he was explaining to me, because I kept saying, what are you doing? Every time you come here, he's like, I'm being a hoodlum. And I go, why are you being a hoodlum? He goes, because I'm not going to just be, I'm not going to be like an outcast. I'm going to be a hoodlum. He goes, at least we all hoodlums, we hang together. He goes, at least we like each other. He goes, those little nerds, he goes, they don't even talk to each other. No one likes them. I'm not going to let that happen. And that's how they view what happens to them, that someone kind of just says, this is your role. And they don't really see that you can kind of overcome that. They really don't know what to do. They think it's a sign. The other thing that goes on with them is that the most pathological person rules, because they are afraid of sticking out, being scapegoated, being dumped on, horrified of that. If you have young adolescents in your group and you expect them to confront older adolescents, you really need to rethink that. That's not something that young adolescents do, is confront one another. If you don't believe me, go to McDonald's and watch a bunch of young adolescents acting stupid. One of them acts stupid and they all act stupid. Okay? Even though one of them will go home and tell their mom, that guy's stupid. He's not going to tell that guy he's stupid. That's how young adolescents are. The most pathological person rules. The person who's the big, bad king guy in middle school is whoever's most pathological. It's terrible. But that's what happens. Whoever's cool. The big, tough kind of gang guy, everybody follows him around. Whoa, you're so cool. That happens. And so what happens is kids do not, at that age, tend to confront one another, especially kids who know the social rules. It's not something that's within their ability to do. And certainly they aren't going to confront an older kid. That's what adults are really there for. They're real happy when you step in and confront because you put a stop to it and they didn't have to, and they need to be happy. They're not mature enough to do it. That's what we're for. We're there to do their dirty work. We're there to confront things and stop inappropriate behavior. And they're really funny because if you stop it, later when I'm coming to you, well, I'm really glad you said that. That was really getting out of control. That was really getting on my nerves. But no way are they going to say that. And we shouldn't expect them to. Developmentally, we shouldn't expect them to. They're not going to do it. Are they going to do it, and it's going to be something that's real awkward that they wouldn't normally do in a real-life situation in middle school? It just doesn't happen that way. Real concerned about scapegoating, and that's why they don't want to do anything to bring the wrath on them, to bring attention on them. Social terror, that's what middle school is like. And you know, it's so scary for them because they know, like you're in 6th grade and that's middle school, and you kind of roll the dice and you got a good roll. Someone gave you a good social roll. Whew, saved for this year. But next year we know it starts all over. Okay, we got through 7th grade. Okay, 8th grade. Oh my gosh, everybody knows that in 8th grade. Nobody knows what's going to happen in 8th grade. And so they kind of every year live in terror that somebody's going to roll the dice and they're not going to get they're going to come out not being in on things, kind of being out of it. And they really do think they have no control over that. Emotional development, brand new feelings for these kids. Never had these before. New, intense, and because they never had them before, they think they have to react to everything. So there are a couple things, and one is that their feelings fluctuate. You know, they can look like they're bipolar. Happy, sad, angry, love you, hate you, can't stand it here, never want to leave. I mean, it's just like from one thing to another, feelings fluctuate constantly because they're new feelings. They never had these kind of abstract feelings before. They don't really know how to deal with them. They're fairly overwhelmed by them. Romance feelings, sexual feelings, cognitive thoughts, all this stuff. They're able to just feel things, and they feel them just very, very intensely. Tend to think that no one else feels them, and they know that no one feels them like they do. They really know that whatever they're feeling, nobody's had that feeling before. Especially if you had it, you never had it as bad as they have it or as intense as they have it. And they don't have an appreciation that feelings will come and go. Even though their feelings fluctuate, they don't have a sense of time. They don't have a sense of temporariness. Kids, adolescents in general, I don't know if it drives me nuts. They have no sense of time. You can hold a stopwatch to a young adolescent. You can say, tell me when it's minutes up, and they go, okay, now. And you know that was 2 seconds. Okay, now. No, that was 5 seconds. They have no concept of time. An adolescent, 2 weeks is like forever ago. You know, to an adult, 2 months was yesterday. And here's the conflict. They'll say to you or they'll say to their parents, the parents will say, what about when you did that? What about, I had this, what about you tried to hurt yourself? You tried to kill yourself. The girl's like, Mom, that was forever ago. You're never going to let me forget that. Never, are you? It was 3 weeks ago. And to Mother, it was like yesterday. Adolescents and adults have a different time frame. 2 weeks to them, because they haven't been alive very long. Okay, 2 weeks to them in their little 12-year life or 14-year life is a long time. 2 weeks to us is like yesterday. So when they say to us, you're not giving me any credit, I've been doing good for 2 weeks, I've been doing good forever, to them it means forever. And we need to understand that they're not lying or manipulating. That's just what it's like to them. And if you can remember when you were in high school, how the years just drug on and you just never thought they would end. And now that you're an adult, it's like you blink and the year's over. We have to understand that from their point of view, they have no concept of time. That's part of their cognitive development. And they get mad at us because time goes quick for us and it drags for them, and 2 weeks of huge effort, and so they don't understand that concept of things being, transitory. Things don't last, and they don't have that concept with their feelings. They feel bad. They think they're going to feel bad forever.